All right, welcome to this fourth video. In this video, we're going to be building our cities up from the ground level. Let's do this. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is prepare our scene for construction of our level. All right, just so we're all in the same view, so everybody's Unity looks the same. We're going to go to Windows, Layouts, Default, and boom, we're all working from the same kind of environment. All right, so what we want to do before we start dismantling the city is we want to make sure all the prefabs, like our enemies and our players we made so far, are saved and nicely tucked away in our little library down here in our project window. So we're just going to go through and I'm going to look at Patrick's mech. And I know he's a prefab because Patrick's mech is in blue right here. And I know that he's a player mech. So I'm going to come and expand this out. I'm just going to grab that black line and scoot it. I'm going to come down here to player mechs. And when we select player mechs, we see that Patrick's mech, yeah, it's giving us that really crazy looking preview from the Toon outliner. But we know for the most part he's there. If you're not sure though, we can select Patrick's mech and go up to our inspector up here and hit that amazing apply button to our prefab. And now Patrick's mech is for sure updated. And I'm not going to get rid of him. We may want to just walk around in our city. And to walk around in our city, we have to have a player object in our hierarchy. So we're going to leave Patrick's mech right where it is. If you want to, you can disable it in the inspector up here, like we've done before, just to kind of visually get it out of the way. But if you want to walk around your city, you've got to activate that player back. All right, I'm going to make sure that my new enemy that I made last video, I went ahead and finished him. Just gave him some legs. Everybody likes legs and some guns. I'm going to make sure that enemy B is saved. So I'm going to go to my enemy mechs folder down here in my project folder. And I got enemy A and enemy B right there. So I'm going to just make sure that enemy B is updated with all of my recent changes because I don't want to lose anything. Nobody wants to lose their work. And I will, though, now that I have applied those prefab changes up here in the inspector, I will now delete him out of my scene because he's nicely saved right here in my inspector. Boom, there he is. There's B and A. Those are a couple bruisers. All right, so I'm going to delete B out of my scene. In fact, I'm going to go on a deletion rampage, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to delete all of this temporary city stuff that I have in place because, you know, it was fun to test out our player in a city-like environment. But this is kind of a prototype level, so we don't really want to use it at all. So what we're going to do is we have 4 folders or objects that we have tucked away in our hierarchy. And these 4 folders, permanent buildings, city streets, destroyable buildings, and city props, all contain the objects that we see in our scene right now. All of our city objects are contained right here. Like I said, we don't want them though. So I'm going to delete them. And I don't know if you know about this, but you can select the first object right up here and hold down Shift, select the bottom object, and it'll select everything in between. Hit that delete key. Shift selection, delete, Shift selection, delete. You can see how everything's just kind of disappearing, and we'll get those props out of there. So now we're left with an empty level. Not even our player showing up because we have him deactivated or disabled. The next thing I want to do is, for some reason, this little plane right here didn't catch the layer that it was supposed to be locked on. It's supposed to be part of the floor. It's going to be pretty frustrating to accidentally select this floor. So this is a good time to teach about how to lock down our layers or, you know, assign layers. So with my plane selected over in my hierarchy, notice my plane right here. So what is this plane? Basically, this is going to be kind of like a little map that we'll create in the future that will draw like a map for our enemies to travel on. And we don't want to make it huge like the concrete plane that you see because it would take so long to compute that map. So that's why we have a separate one, and that's why we need to be able to control how big it is. But for right now, we need to be able to lock it down so we don't keep selecting it. So with my plane selected, we could probably give it a better name, but I'm not going to worry about it. Um, with my plane selected, we have this little area right above our inspector. So I'm going to kind of consider this part of the inspector area of Unity, even though it's not associated with inspector. It's right there at it. So with our layer selected, I can see now that I have a floor level and it's locked, but yet I can still select that floor plane. So what we need to do is we need to assign this plane a layer. So right in our inspector, we have a layer option right here. And right now it's set to default. What we want to do is we want to set that to 10, our floor. And now if we click off of it, I try to click, try to drag, I cannot get at the floor. And that's one less headache we're going to have to worry about when we build our our city. We don't want to have to keep selecting something we don't want to. Locking layers down is the key of maintaining a clean, manageable work environment in your scenes. All right, so we've done a lot of stuff. We've deleted. We've made sure our enemies are saved. What we want to do now is we want to save this scene as our level 1, and it's not going to be a template anymore. So how do we save our scene? We're going to go to File up here in the top left hand, Save Scene As. And it's going to give us something like this. We want to save all of our levels probably in our levels folder. And we have our level 1 template. Well, why don't we just call this level 01? Boom. And if you want to get even more technical, if you want to have a template with, let's go back and save as, go to levels. Let's say you want to have a level 1 template with that prototype city that we had built, and you want to have a empty template like so with nothing in it. So if you want to make a new level in the future, boom, we can just derive it out of this. Okay, so that poses an interesting problem right now because for all intents and purposes, we are in empty template scene right here. You can see it kind of up here. Empty template. That's what scene we're in right now. So we don't want to make any changes to our template because we want our template to be the ground floor to work off of in the future. So we're going to go to File and we're going to open up a scene now. And you guessed it. We're going to open up level 01 and we're going to start building our city. All right, we got a lot to cover in this video, so we're going to just keep moving right along. Our next objective in our level is to create a street layout. I feel like the best way to design a city is by the streets. That kind of tells you the direction the city flows in, kind of gives us an outline of where to place buildings and other props, and it's a pretty easy little asset to start working with right at the beginning. We don't have to worry about all these different types of props or all these different kind of buildings. We can just put down some simple roads and get our city going really easily. So to do that, we need to unlock our streets layer so we can actually select and work with our streets here. So in our layers up here at the top right hand, we're going to go to streets and we're going to unlock that. Notice how our lock is now gray, dark gray, and it's open. So that means we're going to be able to select streets in our scene view here. And it's pretty easy to do some streets. We're going to go down into my project folder down here and we're going to select city streets. And we have a few different options here. We have a small road, a big road, like a 8-lane and a 4-lane, and intersections to match each one. So if you want to create, a nice looking intersection, you can do that. And I'm going to scoot this little slider down at the bottom of my project window. I want to be able to read what these look like. And if I want to see what they look like, right there in the inspector, that's all I need. A lot of people do like the thumbnail version because they can see that model right there, but I don't know. I like to be able to read the whole thing, have it in a list view so I can select them easier. And if I need to look at it, boom, right there in our inspector. So I'm going to bring in a road large, and we are going to place it in city streets. Okay, don't just bring it in and put it in your hierarchy all empty. And definitely don't just throw it straight into your scene view. I'm pretty sure y'all, by now, you've probably accidentally done that and discovered you can just drag things from your library in. Let's do this, and I want to do that. And then I want to duplicate these a few times because I'm probably going to need them. And look how messy our hierarchy is already kind of getting. We just have some random rows just laying around everywhere in here. Some down here, some up there. No bueno. Let's not do that. Because eventually, when you get 100 roads and 500 city objects in your level, you want to have to scroll through 500 things up here in your hierarchy? Heck no. But what we do want to do is we want to drop them right where we say, see, place city streets here. So I'm going to do the smart thing and keep my hierarchy organized. And I'm just going to, drop a city street in. He's looking good. I'm ready to start uh, duplicating and, just making some streets here. Um, the best way to kind of get going quickly making these streets. Oh, that's nice. So up here, this is a pretty important little tool. We have a pivot or center. So by default, the pivot points of these streets are the corners. And that's going to be really handy because it'll help us line up our city streets a little bit better. Or you can do a center, however you want to move your little road around. But I'm going to keep it at pivot. All right. And that's going to allow me to vertex snap these really easily. And what is vertex snapping? Well, by now we know how to control D because when we were making our mechs, we wanted to duplicate some things every once in a while. And so we have two streets right now, and I could just kind of eye it, and that looks pretty good. Except I have a little crack here, a little seam, and it looks like my road has kind of got like this weird line drawn through it now. So let's avoid that. So what we can do, let's say I just duplicated it and I got a road out here, is we're going to learn how to vertex snap. It's going to make snapping our streets together really easy, and we're going to do it easily. So do different words there. So with our V key held down on our keyboard, we can hold it down, and it's weird. Like that little handle, our move handle, is just snapping all over the place. So these streets are comprised of vertices, which are basically where polygons intersect. These little points, all of our little wire meshes of our polygons, they intersect. And we can grab those points and assign our handle to one of them. All right. So that's really important because if we want to snap this corner to that corner and get them to line up seamlessly, vertex snapping is the way to do it. So V key held down. Notice I haven't said click anything yet. So without clicking anything, it's like we're aiming at what vertex we want to snap from. So I've picked this corner. That's where I want to snap from. Now I'm going to left click and hold. And boom, you can see that now I can just snap to any other vertice on this road here. So I'm snapping my corner to that road's corner. And look at what we got now. It's perfectly lined up. If it looks like it has a little seam, that's just because of the grid inside of Unity. These roads are really low. So it looks like we have a seam, but no, take my word on it, we don't, because we vertex snapped it. And it's a beautiful thing. So again, if you hold down V and just aim your cursor without clicking anything, you can pick what vertex you want to snap from. You left click and hold, and then you can pick which vertex you want to snap to on another object. Really handy. And it works beautifully with multiple objects. So I can hold down the shift or control key and select multiple objects, hit control D on that, and now I've actually made two street sections, so I don't have to keep just making one at a time. And if I decide to do my vertex snap by holding down the V key for vertex on my keyboard, and then click and drag to the corner I want to snap to, boom, it snaps my whole selection. And it gets even more beautiful. Oh, exponentially beautiful. And I am making a big road. Oh, well, my handle's down here. How am I going to snap to this? Well, that's the beauty of the V key. We can pick whatever corner or whatever point on the mesh we want to snap from. And boom. And notice how we can still accidentally snap to other things, other parts of the plane here. So you want to be somewhat careful that you're not snapping. And you can even do something like this because there's two vertices right here. See, boom, boom, vertices. So sometimes you might need to get a little close just to make sure you got it lined up. And I just want to make a big road, but I don't want it to be that big. You know what? That's actually big enough because I don't want to make too big of a city for this time purposes. And I'm just going to duplicate and bring it down here. So you can already see how many roads I have in my hierarchy over here. And look, I can collapse it. Oh, so manageable now. Very nice. So what I want to do is make some intersections. I'm just going to make like a ring of a road, do a small little city. So I'm going to bring in an intersection large because I'm working with large roads. So drag and drop intersection large right on, you guessed it, place city streets here. Remember, you don't want to see a line because that's going to put it in between these two things. The circle means we're going to put it into this object. And boom, right there. And I'm just going to drag these at the corners here, like so. Duplicate, kind of move it, get it in place, and then using my V key, just snap it right into place. And then I'm going to do something brilliant here. We're going to drag both of them down this way. Oop, let me get that back. Control Z is the best thing ever. And since I have both of these selected, look what happens. Boom, they're all going to both snap into place. So, you know, if you're smart and purposeful with your clicks, you can make some work really quick rather than just trying to go as fast as you can. You know, put a little brain behind it, put some smarts to it. So now I want to draw some roads here that you know, connect these intersections. So I'm having a problem here though. I need a perfect 90-degree angle. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to snap it to it, and oh, that does not look good, does it? Well, does that mean I'm going to have to sit here and just eye this? Well, now that's all. All right, what we want to do, if you want to get nice 90-degree angles or 45-degree angles, or turn it all the way around with 180 degrees, we can come up to our transform in our inspector. So if you don't see transform, it's at the very top thing always. We can expand it. See how I'm actually at negative 78 degrees? If I do negative 90, then boom, I know I have a complete right angle with this object right here. And now I'm going to snap it so it lines up really nicely. And why don't we go ahead and finish making this little road right here. Now, I don't know if this is going to be long enough. I don't know if this is going to clip. We're just going to make until we break, and then we're going to fix the break. That's the way I say. That's the way I do things. I mean, I do think a little bit, I guess. So yeah, see, here's our problem. Oh no. And then when that happens, we have two meshes right on top of each other, and our camera doesn't know which one to draw. You know, is it which one's behind the other? Well, neither one are. They're both exactly on the same plane, down to infinity. So that's not too good. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to figure out some way to stretch this out. So I'm going to zoom out. We're going to make use of our view cube and our lasso tool, or our box selection. So I'm going to click on the little view cube up here. This is a really handy thing. It'll take me to a top perspective instantly. All right. And in top selection, that means, let me go to a normal view so you can see how it actually looks. I can select things. Notice how it doesn't select the streets until we are encompassing it. So the orange outline is very telling. Oh, we don't want to grab that little street. See at the bottom, we don't want to grab that one. We do want to grab this whole little section. And guess what? I can zoom in and snap, and oh my goodness, it's so nice. And what's more beautiful, I can select these down here, and you guessed it, we're just going to duplicate it upwards. So, you know, there we go. Perfect. So, you know, with some smart tools and some smart selections, we can do a pretty good job of drawing out some streets. And I'll let you guys get as creative as you want here. So the last thing we need to do when finishing our streets is, well, this is a good layout. I don't want to mess it up. So we're going to lock it down so I can't select it or move it anymore. So we're going to go up to my layers, and don't be confused with like this layers button, right? This just assigns what layer the object is on. What we want to do is go to our main layers menu here with our eyeballs and our locks. We want to lock back that street right there. Perfect. Now, look what happens. I can move it because I already had it selected. But the key is that when they're locked, I can't select them. So that doesn't mean you can't get all crazy in your hierarchy and go too fast and accidentally select something here and then, you know, delete it. Boom, it's gone. And now you're going to look at it and be like, what the heck happened? So be careful. You can still select things and move them around by selecting them in your hierarchy. So that's why we have these little groups here. So we can just collapse it, and out of sight, out of mind. We can even select that whole little group there. And if we want to move it around, we can. You know, play city streets here, where we're going to move these city streets right over there. But I'm good. I want to leave them where they were. I'm good. All right, cool. So now that our streets are locked and I can't drag a box or select them in my scene view, we're now ready to go on and define some invisible boundaries for our level so our player can't just walk into infinity and get lost in our level or something. We need to corral that player. They're wily boys, so we got to make sure they stay on track. So the next topic on the agenda is defining these player boundary walls. And we're going to do that by going to our invisible boundary walls right here. And if we expand it, we can see all these boundary walls that I've created for us. And what these things do is they keep the player from being able to walk. They're in our invisible walls in our video game. We know invisible walls exist. We've all seen them in some games. And now we're going to perpetuate the stereotype and continue to be part of the problem of level design. Actually, our boundaries should be decorated, and we'll do that at the very end of making our city towards the very end. But we still don't want our player wandering the desert for 40 years and 40 nights or something over it. This would be uninspired gameplay. But you know what? If you want to give that option to your player, I'm never here to tell you how to design your game. I'm just here to show you the tools so you can get the experience that you want to give to your player. But that'd be stupid. All right, let's go back to our boundaries. Let's go to our boundary walls, and what we have on them is we have an interesting script that I just want to note. We don't really have to set anything inside of it, but what this does is whenever we hit play, and I'm going to show us, we hide our boundary walls. We make them invisible. So this is the devil right here. This is the devil script. But more importantly, we resize them so they're pretty much infinitely tall, so our player can't fly over them. Yeah, we're just really making sure it's basically baby proofing the house. So if we press play, I'm going to show you what that looks like. And I'm going to just go to my game window and just dock it over here so we can see both sides of the story here. All right. But our game's going to crash if we don't have our player enabled. See how our player's disabled? Why don't we go ahead and enable him? I know it's not good to enable players, but sometimes you just gotta let them be free. So we have a free aspect. Why don't we change that to 16:9 so our UI looks not stupid? And what we want to see is what our boundaries turn into. We have these like little translucent logs of green, like clay. When I was a little boy, clay used to look like this and little sticks. That's the little story about my life. Anyway, what we want to see is what these things turn into. So I'm going to press play. And what they turn into is invisible. But what I can do is go during runtime and select one of these walls or all of them. And I'm going to turn on the mesh renderer like so. You know what? Do these even get tall? Let's see. Yeah, they do. It's just really weird how they show it. I think what I do is I increase the colliders on them. They still look kind of short. But if we select one of my boundary walls and hit the F key to zoom out and look at it, boom. You can see that invisible collider there just be real tall. And so, you'd have to have almost infinite fuel to fly over that. So, again, Easter egg, party in the desert if you got that fuel, I guess. All right. It's really a concrete desert, and it's a metaphor for urbanization. All right. We're going to unplay this. I just wanted to talk about our invisible walls because what if you wanted to create a roof for your player? Maybe you have a game type where the experience would be broken if the player could fly too high. So what we could do is we can duplicate one of these walls here and then just bring it up and scale it really big. Our problem, though, is if we started the game, this is going to probably be funny. Oh, I can't move. Ugh. All right. So if we do that, then I don't even know what kind of error this gave. Oh, the game manager? Is it cranky that it doesn't have an enemy to spawn or something? I don't know. Let's see. Power up. Yep. Our game manager is cranky that we don't have an enemy to spawn right here. So there's two ways we can fix this error bug if this is happening to you. So if you ever see an error message in your console saying populate enemy choices right here, enemy manager script right here, then it probably means in our game manager right here that we don't have an enemy in our array over here. See? Enemies that we want to spawn, none. That's dangerous. So we can either put an enemy here, but I think the easiest thing to do, and we're in game manager, so this is kind of unexplored territory. You got to face reality at some point. You got to grow up. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our game manager, and over here in our game manager script, GM for game manager, we're going to go down to spawns, and we're going to stop spawning things. Let's see if that fixes it. It may not. We may have to put the enemy in. Yep, it still wants to see the enemy. It checks for the enemies, even though we're not going to spawn them. So we're forced to put an enemy right over here. So why don't we just go to our project window and go to our enemy mechs folder right here. And we got enemy A and enemy B. You know, I'm kind of glad this is happening because this will probably be a common bug that you guys may see while you build your city. So we're going to solve it right now. You can see how we can get things going. I'm going to drag enemy A from my prefabs folder all the way to where you see how it has none game object. Let's give it a game object. Enemy A. That's what's going to spawn here. And I will get more in depth about how we can start spawning our enemies and what all these little properties mean right here and why it looks so confusing. There's a good reason for it. I'm not going to say one of which is I'm not a very good programmer, but another one of which is it. We'll just get to it. All right, quit wasting time. So we now have an enemy we can spawn, so the game's not going to be cranky, I hope. There we go. Now we can walk around. You know what? I can't walk around because if we pause, this new boundary I made, look at it. It's just crushing the player. It's just crushing its will to live. He's inside. He's basically under a big invisible rock, and he's not happy. So if you have like a boundary wall, you want it to be the roof. Why don't we just name it roof? So I'm going to select my boundary 5 that I've got here floating above us. We're going to right click it and go to rename. We'll call this roof. And I think to fix that, you know, being under the hill of the collider, we can go over to our inspector and we can just disable this script that resizes our boundary. And now this particular roof object, it won't get big, and we should be able to move around now. Oh, and we can. So that's how we can put a roof on our level. All right. I'm going to drop it down, though, because it's going to be in the way as I tweak these invisible barriers right here. And this is going to be a simple level. I just want to make I'm going to close off access on the outside of the street, so the player will only be able to walk around in the street area. The best way to do this is to use that view cube again, and that way I can properly put it here. I'll leave a little bit of a sidewalk area. Let's grab that one. Looks like that's boundary 4, and we're just going to come in and adjust our walls here. Perfect. And boundary 2, or is it boundary 3? And guess what? You don't have to be confined to just this left, right, up, and down boundaries. If you wanted to, for example, we could create just a crazy looking maze like this, duplicating our boundary walls and rotating them. Heck, you could do something like this. You know, who says you have to be at a right angle? You know, only squares are right angles, sometimes rectangles. And we can make, you know, a little corral and, you know, or just some kind of weird maze that the player has to navigate through. You know, a maze level is definitely within the bounds of what we want to do. In fact, you could have a maze level with a power-up that you have to find that gives you enough damage to actually damage the boss, and you've created Metroid. I mean, come on, guys. We just made Metroid. We're going to delete those, though. I don't want to do that. And I don't want to use this roof, actually. I was just showing you guys how we could have a roof, because I don't want my player to be constrained by his flight. But I do want, you know, if we press play, I need to fix this jump jet. Look at it. That's insane. It takes all my fuel, and look what I can do. I just jump up like a spazoid. All right, so I'm going to pause the video and come back with a better jetpack. I did it, guys. I tweaked a few settings like the jet cost in my player mover and or in my stats, and in my player mover, I just took my jet strength down and my fall speed down, so I don't fall down like a meteorite. There we go. Let's test this. Oh, it's so nice. And I love it when you zoom in, you can really see the camera shake go in action. Pretty cool. It's visceral. Um, so yeah, we got our boundaries in place now, so that's perfect. We'll decorate what these look like. We need to put some mountains or some non-destructible buildings kind of in these little green logs. But for right now, we're just making our tiny little earnest level, and we need to move on to the next part. We need to make some destructible buildings in our level now. That's one of the main hooks of the level design here is buildings that we can blast apart, and then they create little vision and slowdown hazards once they're reduced to rubble. So why don't we go ahead and make our city spark and spit up some concrete for us. Player Mechs, no, where what? I'm at a loss here, man. What folder could possibly our buildings be in? And by now, I hope you know that if you just kind of read what the things I've labeled, you can probably figure most of this stuff out on your own. Sometimes the hardest part, though, is figuring out where that folder that I've seen called buildings is. And it's in our little toy chest, our project window, our library of fun time. And this particular fun time toy is our destructible buildings. And I'm going to take building huge. You can see a little preview there of it. It looks kind of not the best, right? It looks unfinished. We're going to drag and drop building huge. And, we're just going to throw it in the level, right? That's probably the best thing to do, I think, is just be real quick and make it as quick as possible and don't really care, just no, we don't want to do that. We want to keep our hierarchy manageable. This will save you when you have over 5,000 objects worth of city stuff in one of your biggest levels that you make. That will save you. So we do want to put this in destroyable buildings here. All right, so perfect. And the beauty about going ahead and putting your very first building in here is when you duplicate it, your little child duplication, he's already grouped up. So that's why I like getting the habit of just go ahead and dragging out all my assets into my group, because then I don't have to go and play Made and clean up the city. I guess I should have said more like Spider-Man or something like that. Clean up the city. So we're going to put this right at the corners here. And I'm just duplicating. I'm not worried too much about the behaviors of the building. I'll go back and set those one at a time. Or you know what? I think we should talk about behaviors of buildings. That way we can create a baseline behavior. So when we duplicate them, they'll all share the baseline same behavior. And basically that means whatever settings we set over here, our duplications are going to have as well. And that'll cut down on a lot of the work for us. So our slow amount at a default of 2, I think that's a pretty good value. You can test right now and see what that does. And the best way to test what the rubble hazard does is to drop our building health down to 1. So it just takes 1 shot to kill. It's going to look, or maybe 2. And it's going to look super weird. Boom. So instant rubble machine. I never get tired of seeing that. And we can kind of see in our scene view right here the differences in speed. So this is what a penalty of 2 speed does. I can't see, and it makes me slow. And I can even, while I'm playing, I can tweak this building as long as I have it selected. See how I have it selected in my hierarchy, and all my rubble and clouds are orange. I know I got my building selected. So I can tweak what 3 slow does to us. That's pretty slow. Can we go up past 3? Nope. 3's the maximum. I don't want to make... See, I didn't want to accidentally have a designer have that so slow that our player gets stuck in there and can't get out at all. So I had to put a cap on it. And we can even affect how much we're blinded by. A full 50's worth of blind. I mean, that is a blackout. You can still see a little bit if you get lucky, maybe. Oh, I'm finally out. Or we can have no. We can have no. And we don't have any vision penalty. Or, we can do nothing on either one of them. So rubble is just whatever. Oh, well, I guess it's set at 1. It's going to have some anyway. I guess I am kind of forcing some of my design habits on you as, and just deal with it. Unless you can program and then go in and mess up all my scripts. So don't do that, please. So blind them out. Let's find a happy medium with these two. Let's be happy. So we're testing the behaviors of one building. So all the rest of them, when we duplicate this one, will have the same kind of behavior. Or, you can have different ones. So what we want to do now is, untest. And we'll notice that my values went back to what they originally were, but I kind of had them in the middle anyway, so that's fine. And I'm not going to do building looks right here because that's kind of what you should set different for every building in your city so you give some variation. I just really wanted to make sure that my health and my slow and blinds were all good. Don't want to have my building health at 1. Let's put it at 20. So it takes 20 damage. Right now, my player's shooting about, I don't know, 2 or 3 points of damage every hit. So, I want the city to be destroyed. You might have some levels where you actually have to work at taking a building down because it may be a shortcut somewhere, or it has a power-up hidden underneath it. Yeah, we can do that. And I'll show us how when we get the power-ups. What I want to do, though, is start just duplicating these huge buildings. And I'm not going to go too inspired with the design here, but I do want to just populate a nice city, just duplicating down the row. Kind of got them nicely spaced out. And then I'm just going to pick random ones right here and, hold down control to select random buildings. We'll 2 of the buildings will be the same. And let's set that to light gray, and let's set their stories to 7. And these stories will be 5. You know what? We can't select these buildings. Why don't we unlock the layer of building up here? So I can now select each building. So now I can select the building and tweak it to my heart's content. So that'll be a 9-story. This is going to be a 3-story. This is going to be a 10er. It's going to be a 6er. There we go. I can stay 5. I'm going to do some light gray buildings. Let's do a brick building there and a brick building here. All right. So we can see what things look like right now. So notice my buildings get big. They embiggen as soon as I press play. So I automatically kind of make it 10 stories with our building. Just like, I think that's a fair amount of damage for a building. Because enemies are going to be shooting it too, right? So we got to get over it. And boom, I'm going to turn the volume down on my game right there so we don't get too distracted by it. There we go. So, pretty cool little effect. Enemies won't pass through these, even if they're a building or even if they're rubble. So you can kind of duck into a building, and I'm not going to say they won't see you in there, because they're definitely going to see you enter it, but they definitely can't enter through it and take shortcuts through destroyed buildings. They are set on a path. Even if the building spits out a bunch of little pieces of clay at us. All right, so that's our buildings in our level. Why don't we throw in some small ones just for good measure? I'm gonna control click both building large and small, and go ahead and place both of them into my destroyable buildings group. And why don't we just go ahead and have some fun and put these some places. Our small buildings, they're just small guys. We can make a little cluster of them right here. Maybe it's like a little mom and pop storefront. Ooh, I have a feeling I might put a narrow street down here. It's like a little back alley street. I'm going to delete these actually. Let's add some variety. Let's bring in the large one. And now we've kind of created an interesting little display here. I didn't set the values of health for all of these 4 little buildings. So rather than just set each one, I'd rather just go back and delete them and do it the right way. And go ahead and set this value at 10 because small buildings should die easier if you ask me. So our big building, huge ones have 20. Small ones will have 10. Let's make our large ones have 15. That seems balanced. Blind amount, we'll keep it like so. I just wanted to make sure our healths were lining up pretty nicely between building to building. Players like to see a little bit of consistency. It gives them a sense of accomplishment like they're learning a system. Everybody loves to learn systems. So we want to make that as rewarding as possible. We want to give our player, a sense of mastery in our game. Like, I'm learning how these buildings work. There we go. Boom. So that's a nice little place. You know what? Now's a good time to show you how you can go back and tweak your streets if you want to. I'm just going to go in and kind of randomize these up, set them at different colors and story links. That'll be a tall one. This is going to be a really short guy, and he will stay dark gray. I'm just going to make sure I have a nice, good mix. So I got a light gray, a brick, and 2 dark grays. And this one, yeah, he can go light gray. That's fine with me. So why don't we see what that looks like? Boom, a little city. City square. So these orbitals here, so they're just all right. So now if we walk through them, we get the same effect. It is noted, though, that you can fly out of rubble if you need a get out of jail free card. Oh, and I'm walking on a building. That's nice. That's pretty cool. Boom. And you know what? That could be considered bad design, but game engines don't render the back or insides of meshes. But in this, it kind of creates a nice little vignette that we can actually look into. And it's kind of like, it's a feature. This is a feature. It kind of gives us a silhouette outline that we know there's a building right here, but we can still see our player. And then in the extreme case that we don't clip through a building, we have that nice little toon outline for us. It's so nice. All right, so I'm going to pause this and put in some more buildings in here, and then I'm going to show you how we can put that street, and then we're going to decorate our boundaries, then we're going to put some props in, and then, good Lord, this video will finally be done. But cities are pretty complicated, This video is always going to be a little bit longer than the others. So I'm going to pause and put some more buildings in here. So this is an interesting little area that I want to talk about. Right now, I want to kind of fit 2 large buildings here, but it's really cramped up in there. Guess what? We can scale buildings, We can scale them this way and some different dimensionality to them. But I don't encourage you to scale them too crazy. Like, maybe don't do something like this or something. Let's see what that looks like. See, when you scale it too much, especially vertically, our roof just doesn't get set on it quite right. But if you do it, lengthwise and widthwise, it's fine. But we scaled this guy up, and the roof is just not looking good. So we don't want to scale up our buildings. And look, it's just acting all weird now. So I'm going to go to my. That's the wrong button. I'm going to go to my place destroyable buildings here, and we'll zoom in on here. And notice how it's all big now because we kind of selected it weird. I'm just going to collapse it, select my bad building, and with my bad building selected, I'm going to come over here to my transforms and my inspector, and we're going to set that Y value. We're going to set all of our scale values to 1. So I'm going to click and press 1, 1, 1. That'll give it its default scale. And now, if we press play, the building looks fine again. Our roof is looking good. But we still have some longer buildings right there. So you can scale, just not upwards. All right, let me finish making this. All right, I was already finished making that. Why don't we put a street in here that runs down the middle of the road? It'll be a small little street. So I'm going to go to city streets. Right now, streets are locked, but buildings are not. If you have trouble, remember, if you're trying to put in some more streets and these buildings keep getting in the way, I'm going to lock down my building layer. Boom, I can't select them. And I'm going to unlock my streets layer. Now I can select streets again. So I'm going to go to my streets folder down here in my project, and I'm going to drop in road small. I'm going to make sure that I can find my city streets folder up here, which is really a game object that contains all of our streets. And I'm going to drop in road small right where it says city streets. Boom, it's parented. And we're going to make a little small road right down the middle of this city. I'm not going to worry too much about intersections here. I want to make this a quick little ditty. And snapping it gets a little bit harder because now we can snap the buildings. And you may not be able to find a center point to snap to. So you may have to eye this one. So we're going to come in close. And we're going to overlap just a little bit. And then the same song and dance. Duplicate, snap to the road. Duplicate both, snap to that road. Duplicate 4, snappity snap. And we're going to grab 8. I should be able to get away with 8 here. Boom, 8. And I'm going to dock my game view here so we have a bigger view of the work I'm doing here. So this is an interesting problem as well. We've made my little cutting street right here, but it's just too much. I mean, do we extend this, but then that won't meet? Sometimes you may just want to scale things down just so they meet. Pretty good. That's too much. I'm going to zoom in here. Zooming in gives you finer control over moving, positioning things with move, and scaling things with our scale tool. And boom, we have a little city street right there. I'm going to go one step further, and we're going to create an intersection right in the middle of the city. 90 degrees in the transform. Let's bring in an intersection small. I'm just going to put it right like, no, intersection small. I'm going to travel up so you can kind of travel up. I'm still holding down my left click, drag and drop it. Here's my intersection right there. Now I can kind of come in and rebuild that part. Again, we're not quite matching up, so we're going to do a little bit of scaling again with our R key. There we go. That's pretty good. Duplicate this. I have a feeling we're going to have to scale down pretty hard right here. I'm going to scale up both of these. And you'll see now that these streets are overlapping. But boom, and then scale down a little bit. So scale works for us. It does some pretty good work. I'm not going to say you just need to scale like that. That looks terrible. But you can get away with small micro adjustments like that. So scale is not something you want to use too liberally when you're designing stuff because it can stretch things out, make it not look the best it could look. But it serves its purpose well for minor tweaks. This is funny. Here's my pivot point on this side, so I have to position here and scale down right here in the middle. All right. My city's really coming along now. I have a nice little intersection between my main highway. Now we're going to decorate the impossible boundaries with some buildings and some mountains. So that's pretty easy to do. We just got to drag and drop them into our non-destructible or permanent buildings area. So again, I'm going to lock down my layers for my streets, unlock my building layers, and I'm not going to drag and drop. Yeah, I am, because I'm going to be able to put my non-destructive buildings right here. Buildings folder, building huge. Place permanent buildings here. First thing I want to do before I even move it is turn off this little stat in my building behavior over here in my inspector. Building stats, this building cannot be destroyed. And nothing else matters. The health doesn't matter. The slow and blind don't matter. The looks still matter. I mean, looks are pretty important. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of populate our big buildings kind of where our invisible wall is, right? We want to give our player a sense that this invisible wall has a reason for being there. And you know what? I'm not going to get too crazy with decorating it. I'm just going to do the same large building over and over again. Really give the player a hint that, these are really tall-ass, large-ass buildings. Don't go here. And I'm going to make them all level 10. This 10 stories, but I do want to give them different colors at least. We don't want this place to look like a prison, even though we're making a prison right now for our player. All right, cool. So I got one down that way. And why don't we go up here? I'll leave that there, and we'll just keep duplicating it on up. Grab these three, and I'm going to put mountains on the other side so it's a little bit more visually interesting. And dark gray, dark gray, dark gray. These are all dark gray. Let's change them up. Light gray, brick, and that'll be dark gray. So I got some buildings right there that aren't going to be destroyed. They're going to contain my player. We're going to put some mountains in now, and mountains are actually found in city props. I just felt like an appropriate place for them. So I'm going to grab all three mountains actually with my shift selection and drag and drop them into permanent buildings. And boom, I got some nice mountains I can put at the edge of my town. Maybe not the most practical way to build a city, like basically on near some big ass mountains and just build a road next to it, but this is destruction mech land. We can do whatever we feel like. You can put some buildings behind it, or you could, just use it as a visual thing where you just make it really big. I don't think the player will ever see back there unless they fly up really high, but it might be a nice little vignette as they fly with their jetpacks. I just know that we need to plug this invisible wall up with a reason it's all cranky and won't let us through. So I'm just going to keep decorating and duplicating. You don't have to do anything to these mountains other than place them, because the invisible boundary here will just do it all for us. Boom. Maybe I'm going to kind of see, you can intersect them pretty nicely. It's nice and pastoral. You got a city by the mountains. Hey, we do live in the Blue Ridge Mountains, I guess. There we go. Notice how I rotated it just to give it a little bit more visual variety. Looks like a butt. Let's test it. Boom, this is our city. So maybe those mountains need to be a little bit bigger because these buildings are just big guys next to these mountains. But we can't climb up the mountains because it's just too impassable. Too much shoot into our mountains. Let's hit play. And, we can rotate with E and R. I don't know why more top-down shooters don't let you rotate the camera. And it's going to be necessary because part of the nature of blowing up the city. Let's bring our camera. We can aim our guns with R and F. And for some reason, R, the top key, makes them go down, and F makes them go up. I'm not changing that. So we can kind of walk through our city now. There's a nice little intimate battle area created. And, of course, the player knows, okay, maybe I shouldn't. Oh, and look, maybe we can see behind our buildings sometimes, right? So maybe putting some nice mountains behind our buildings right there can make our level look a little less lame. Okay. So let's see. Can I fly up over here? Nope, I can't make it over. It's keeping me in. I'm compelled. Okay. Perfect. I love just walking around my city. All right, the next step is to add some city props, because right now the city's pretty empty. We want to knock some things around, not just rubble. We want to knock around some lampposts, street signs, and so we're going to get into that right now. So I'm going to collapse my permanent buildings here. I'm going to go to my layers. Let me zoom in on layers here, up here at the top. Sorry about the spastic camera movement. Building, we're going to lock down, and then city props, we're going to unlock. We want to be able to touch these props and move them around. And the last city folder to be populated would be our city props folder. So let's make sure we drag and drop our props there straight out of library. And I'm going to start by laying down some street lights. And then I'm going to show us how we can create a cluster of objects so we don't have to place every single little corner with a lamppost and a sign. We can make a cluster of them, and then we can just put those clusters all around the city. We can populate it really fast with some pre-made prefab clusters. But first, I'm going to just show us the easiest way to do this. is just to create a simple street light by dragging and dropping it into city props. And if we press the F key, notice how I guess my camera was fixated on maybe something over here. So when I came over here, I rotated and it was just all janky. So I'm going to select my prop in my street. So with them deselected, you can grab it like that, or you can, try to click it. That's a small guy. We're going to press F on it. So now I rotate around it. And that way I get easier control. And you know what? I'm going to go the other way first. And we're going to put street lights all the way up and down this city street right here. We're going to do our duplication trick where we kind of pull it over. We select both of them, pull it over, both of them, pull it on over. Then I'm going to take all of these and drag them down here because I kind of started in the middle. And then we're just going to fill our city with lights. They don't emit light because it's the daytime, but I can definitely walk the hell through them and knock them around. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm just going to really zoom out. We're going to fist of God these and just grab them all. If you can't get all of them, hold down Shift and you can finish getting the rest of them. Duplicate, Control D. If you zoom in, boom, and look at the beauty of Unity. Rotate. Oh, they all rotate with me. So nice. And so I don't know if that's a perfect rotation. Probably not. That's good enough. So now I got city lights all up and down my streets. People are going to be walking around at night, I guess. Don't want them to be scared. Do we want city lights down here? I don't care right now. It doesn't matter. But I do want to show us a technique that'll make our work a lot faster. And that's by creating prefabs of a bunch of little city objects that we can place. And that way we don't have to put down every single cone and every single trash can. All right, so it's a pretty involved process. So I'm going to go very confidently through this. Slow but confident, not too draggy. So the first thing we got to do is create an empty little game object that we can use and make our own folders with. So you guys might have wondered how I created these little folders inside of my hierarchy. Well, it's my phone. Got rid of that. I don't even remember what I was talking about. Yeah, we're making our clusters here. So I'm glad that happened right before we started and not in the middle. All right, so we're going to grab our game object window right up here, our menu, I guess. Yeah, that's a menu. And we're going to go to Create Empty. Okay? And that's going to give us these little handles. And it's just, I don't know why Unity it's done it for years. Whenever you create an empty, it just puts it in God knows where, somewhere in your scene. So, this is our empty object, and it's in the bowels of hell, I guess, or in the Earth's crust. We're going to reset that. So we're going to go up to Transform with my new game object selected. Let's zoom in so you can see what I'm up to. This gear cog is really small. We're going to reset that. Notice how we're zeroed out right here. And now we're in the middle of our map. So anytime I make like a prefab, I always reset the transforms because I like my prefabs to start out in the center of the map. So I know exactly where I'm working and things are a little bit neater. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to rename this empty game object by right-clicking it and go to Rename. And we're going to call this Prop Cluster A. So now this will be a group for a bunch of different objects that we got going on. And it may be tempting to go ahead and place your objects like you would in the universe, but remember, this is our new group, and this is where our pivot for our new group is going to be. So we kind of have to build it around this little pivot here to make it easier to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to just bring in, I don't know, a news thing, and instead of placing it under city props, I'm going to place it under prop cluster. So we brought in like a little gas or newsstand. I guess it's just a thing. We called it newsstand. And then, maybe a fire hydrant. Make sure we're putting it on cluster. I kind of just freaked out there. So we got a little fire hydrant next to that, and then we can put a little sign here. We're not caring too much about the viability of having a fire hydrant next to a sign next to a. We're just making little clusters because the player just wants to just smash stuff. I'm not saying just put things willy-nilly unless that's what you want to do, but we can do whatever we want. And maybe a little cone. I don't know. Well, that's not too little, but anything smaller than that, you might not have been able to see, but we can make it smaller if we want to. And so now we got a little cluster of objects. I'm going to kind of place them here regularly. And now when we select prop cluster A, they all come along with us. So now we can just duplicate this little cluster around our city, and it speeds up the process of propagating a lot of destructible objects around our city that will go flying around. We're going to go one step further, though, and we're going to make this a prefab. So it's part of our library in our project folder. So with city prop selected, we're going to make a new folder called premades down here. So city props, right click on it, go up to create folder. And that's going to put a new folder on top of all of our things here. I'm going to call this premades. And this folder is going to be a magical place where I can put all my pre-made clusters, like this little guy. And, you want to make a new cluster, duplicate it, call it something different, delete cluster A because we already got it saved down here as a prefab, and then go in there and just make it a little bit different. Maybe you won't want to break this prefab, though. Sometimes you have to destroy to create. I'm so freaking deep. And I don't want to, let's just lay waste. Let's make a new little cluster. I'm going to do it again so you can kind of see what's going on. This time I'm going to make like an industrial cluster with barrels and crates. So there's a barrel, there's a little crate. Why don't we put like, where are those wood pallets? And, we can decorate our wood pallet to kind of like lean on this. That'd be a nightmare to do this every single time you wanted to have a little cluster where the pallet's leaning like so. This is like a construction site or just some back alley with the refuse and dumb stuff. And we can even make another one. And what's beautiful about this is I'm going to press play. You're going to see it's going to take us to game view. Let's split our game view into two again so we can get both sides of our story straight. And gravity takes over for these guys, and they kind of just stack up nicely. So that's pretty, that's nice. So, you can have some things kind of floating, and when the game plays, they kind of settle into place. It may look a little weird. You can see things kind of fall down. Oh, building blocked it, so maybe we can't. But, I'm just saying you don't have to be exact on the ground with this stuff because gravity will do that for you. And I'm going to do one more where this one's just really about to, like, slide out. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, you know what? And to add a little bit of visual interest, we're going to make this kind of sit the opposite way. And again, I'm not really worried too much about how they're laying on. We just want to test it by pressing play just to make sure that they kind of settle nicely. And now we have a nice little industrial cluster. In fact, I'm going to do another barrel. I've never seen a barrel without another barrel beside it. Think about that in video game design, where there's one barrel. There's going to be a few barrels. And that's because we have a limited amount of props to propagate in our level. So level designers, we are level designing right now, believe it or not. They like to reuse their art assets because they have a limited amount. We got to stretch it and reuse things. It's called modular design, reusing the same thing over and over again, but positioning them in creative ways so we don't get visual fatigue in our level. But where there's one barrel, there's two. And if they're red, they explode. We all know that. So here's another great cluster. I can't believe I did this. Cluster B will now be saved in our city props. Premades, cluster B for the win. So what I'm going to do now is using these techniques I've shown you is just prop up my city. Get it real proppy in here. And then my level will be done, and we can start thinking about future design things of how to get enemies spawning, how to get power-ups dropping, and our overall game managing logic on how to beat these levels and progress. Thanks. Just let me pause, and you can see maybe what I did. I'll be right back, but it's basically the end of the video. Stick around. It might be okay. Here's a word to the wise. As I was putting down my prop clusters, I realized that my clusters are all outside, just floating free in my hierarchy. That ain't good. We're going to go ahead and put our prop clusters in our city props. They're just going to be consider these like one game object, because when you click a part of it, it selects all of it. If you double click a part, okay, the move tool got a little in the way. If you double click something within your prefab, see how I'm a little handles getting in the way as being a opponent. You can select individual things in our prefabs. So just because you click it once and move it doesn't mean you can't go in and further edit what those little clusters look like. And we want to just make sure they're parented under our city props here so we can keep a nice clean hierarchy. I'm sure you're so tired of hearing me say that. I'm tired of saying it. Let's make this level and I'll come back. All right, time warp. I'm back. I don't want to keep my video recorder on pause the whole time. I do want to make one more note, and I do want to show you kind of a little scenario I've made. The layout of your level can be iconic. This can kind of be our intersection map. But players aren't going to really remember a layout of a level too much. What they are going to remember are little flourishes or little stories that you tell in your level. And they'll remember that this is the car crash level or something like that. Or, the barrel level where the barrels are just littered the streets. Or if you can tell some kind of narrative story here, that's the kind of stuff that sticks in players' minds. That's the kind of stuff when they talk about, did you play the car crash level? That's how we talk as video game players. So you need to give your audience a vocabulary on how to talk about their experiences with your game. And the best way to do that is through, environmental narrative like this. This seems pretty brutal. Maybe they were trying to evacuate the city, and you could have a whole line of cars kind of just bendered up here or something. Why don't we press play and see what this looks like? I want to make my screens a little bit bigger so you can kind of see what's going on. Let's make our game view a little bit bigger. But I want to keep my view on here so you can kind of see what happens. All right, so let's press enter. I'm going to zoom in with my mouse, and I'm going to rotate the camera. So here we can see my car crash scene. So I'm showing this because I want to discuss whoa. So cars just seem to fly everywhere, while everything else, yeah, it's exaggerated, but those cars went flying, right? Why is that? Well, I'll show you. And we might need to tweak some settings on those cars, but my cars are just littered everywhere in here. What we're going to do is we're going to go up to my hierarchy up here, and we're going to type in car. And basically, so all the different parts of the cars have car wheel, but we're looking for prop car. So we're going to select our prop cars, and we're going to go to our inspector over here. And I don't know what your inspector looks like, so if it's all collapsed, it looks like this. We want to expand rigid body, and we want to increase our mass to, instead of 0.01, let's do 0.2 on our rigid body mass on our car props that we have laying in our level. Okay, we're going to hit play, and hopefully we can see that the cars now don't go flying too much. They go, they still go flying. But that's just, I want to tell you guys that if you select the prop and go to the rigid body and increase the mass of something, what if I increase it to 4? Increasing the mass of your rigid body on our little city props will kind of affect, let's see. Now they're slowing me down. I can't push them anymore. So, I've kind of created a little roadblock. And that's best seen over here. I created a barrier. Barriers by default have high mass, so they can actually hinder the player there's my street lamps. They can hinder the player from kind of going through a level. So you can create a street lamp that when you hit it, it stops you if you wanted. All the rest of them go flying, but that one is like uh, a telephone pole in GTA. Everything else is kind of blown up, but that telephone pole is gonna, or that one tree is gonna just total you. All right, so I'm probably gonna keep decorating this level. So what the heck? My whole level's white. Well, that's because I still have car written up here in my hierarchy. We need to X out that. And now we go back to Happy Dreamland. Okay, cool. So, again, decorating your city with city props is, more of a visual joy. It doesn't really have too much bearing on gameplay, unless, remember when we added a lot of mass to our barrier, a mass of 5. I imagine if you do a mass of 20, you will not be able to move something. So that you can kind of play with the physics in our level like that as well. All right, this video is ran really long. I appreciate you being patient with me. A lot of cover, but at the same time, we made a city, and that's no small feat. All right. Before we leave, though, we need to make sure that we save this level. And to do that, we want to go to File, and we don't want to do just save scenes. I had a student or two tell me that save scenes doesn't save things. I'm taking it with a grain of salt, but it's always, I guess it is good practice to do save scene as when you want to make double, triple sure that you saved your level. So I'm going to navigate the levels, and this was level 01. I'm just going to select level 01 and override it and replace it. And now level 01 of my game is in full swing. There we go. So if we want to test and play through the level, we can, and walk around. All right. Thanks, guys. Next video, we'll see how we can get enemy spawners made and, maybe start fighting enemies in this level.